This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We want to know more, do you? Informed Sources brings our region's top print and broadcast journalists together.
To examine the stories behind the headlines.
And we can all learn more.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. If the Orleans Parish jail escapees have left any legacy, it has been to create awareness about how shoddy the conditions are at the facility. This week, the City Council and the Sheriff were at odds over what needs to be done there. One public building that got glowing reviews from a university study was the Superdome as the catalyst for the regional economic impact of hosting the Super Bowl. Another sports arena, however, is facing some serious issues as the owner of the fairgrounds, Churchill Downs, is threatening to shut down the historic racetrack because of cost issues aggravated by legal complications. A horse race of a different sort is the upcoming New Orleans mayoral election. A new poll this week revealed who has the early lead coming out of the gate. And Mayor Cantrell has barely had time to unpack from her recent trip to Ottawa, Canada, before heading to Nice, France, for a weekend summit. We will discuss why. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Ben Myers, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and Tony McCauley, staff writer also with the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to stick with Tony because we're hearing about Churchill Downs right now and the fairgrounds. Churchill Downs, the owner of fairgrounds, says they need more money. Otherwise, maybe they'll shut it down, or perhaps maybe somebody else will buy it. So what's going on over there?
Yeah, it's the parent company of Fairgrounds, Churchill Downs, Inc., which is the Kentucky-based company that runs the famous horse race. Their biggest horse race operator in the country. They've said that they can't run fairgrounds profitably now that the Supreme Court in Louisiana has made these machines called historic horse racing machines, which are basically slots based on past run races, that those are illegal and have to be approved on a parish-by-parish basis if they want to bring them back, which would be a long, laborious process. So they're saying, well, what we need is a subsidy to replace that lost revenue, which made up 46% of the revenue that they make in the state, which includes 13 OTBs as well as fairgrounds. And even more of their profitability, about 3/4 of their profitability. So they say they need a subsidy or they will have to pull out here. They have to decide this pretty quickly because they start incurring fines if they don't make investments in improving the track from July, which they're contracted to do, and then they have to run the 76-day season starting traditionally opening on Thanksgiving Day here.
Would you explain something you say quickly? Because I can see people being surprised saying, did he say betting on past run races? Mm-hmm. How does that work? I would do that. I would bet on a past run race.
Well, they have, these machines have an enormous database of races that were run in the past, and they anonymize them, so you don't know the track, you don't know the horses, etc. Theoretically, you can try to pick your winners based on, the same way that you would betting on horses by looking at form and so on. But in practice, most people just do random picks, so they operate in practice mostly like slot machines.
And they have big payouts.
They have payouts that in some states can be over $1 million because you can do horse racing betting like trifectas and that sort of thing. It's $100,000 cap in Louisiana, which is significantly more than the $1,000 cap on video poker. So they become very popular since they were allowed in 2021.
And that led to the challenge, and then which led to the court ruling.
Yes, that's right. The truck stop operators challenged it legally, saying it was unconstitutional. It was found in March of this year by the Louisiana Supreme Court that it was unconstitutional, that it was a new form of gambling that had to be approved on a parish by parish basis. So that's where we are now, and it's basically now whether or not the Landry administration, the legislature, decides that it will pass a bill that will give a subsidy similar to what happened in Florida last year, that would be spread amongst the 4 different racetrack operations in Louisiana, which most of which would go to Fairgrounds, which is by far the largest.
If Churchill Downs does decide to bail out, you mentioned in one of your stories that Gail Benson might be looking at it.
Yes. Well, what I said was sources close to Gail Benson said that she was open to it because when her husband Tom was still alive about 8 years ago, they had a serious look at it. Went through all of the process of looking at the numbers, and they got pretty far with that, but they didn't. One of the issues at the time was that the NFL looked down on, or it had rules that would prevented team owners from getting into certain kinds of betting. Now, the Supreme Court decision subsequently has relaxed those rules, and the NFL has various other owners who are in that business. So it's a kind of a different ballgame now. But it's a theoretical discussion now as to who might step in if Churchill Downs actually did decide to pull out.
And of course, there's people worried about what this means for the Jazz Fest.
Yeah, well, Jazz Fest is actually a big profit center. It's two-thirds of the year. It's a casino. Jazz Fest is a big contributor. About $3 million a year was what they said at the hearing where the Churchill Downs threatened to pull out. Mm-hmm. Some of the other folks said, "Oh, well, $3 million a year revenue. You have to take that into account from Jazz Fest." So most of the time it's a casino and an events place where people have weddings and all kinds of events like that.
So we don't have much time for this current session of the legislature. Is anything moving through?
There are. What we hear is that there are ongoing efforts that Jimmy Harris, the local representative for which includes the Fairgrounds area, is working with some other legislators to try and get a bill. There was a bill that came through, HP 540, I think it was called, which would offer some money, but clearly not enough for Churchill Downs in terms of subsidy to all the racetracks, of which they would get a share.
Okay, we'll see how this gallops along, huh? Or maybe not gallop, but move along slowly.
Right.
But we'll see. Okay, thanks a lot, Tony. Okay, E, over to you. There was a poll that came out on the New Orleans mayor's race.
A poll came out, yeah. As far as I know, this is, I think, the first kind of name poll that that's come out. I mean, there have been kind of a lot of informal polls, but anyway, it was by a group out of Baton Rouge called JMC Analytics and Polling. They polled 500 likely voters. They say that they were commissioned by political action committees and not by campaigns. But we all know how that works with political action committees. But anyway, and of that, they asked, who do you want for mayor? And they also asked if anybody you really don't like. In the mayor's polling, Helena Moreno has a substantial lead with 52%. Oliver Thomas is second with 23%. And then Arthur Hunter is third with 11%. There's 3 other candidates, and they divide up the other 14% of the votes. So at this point, that's a pretty strong lead. Now, I know it's right out there that somebody's saying, these polls are too early, they don't mean any much, it's just a snapshot in time. They don't mean that much. But in the early polling, it is better to be shown as the leader than to be in last place, because that's going to influence a lot of people's opinions as far as fundraising, that sort of thing. And so it's very much good news for Moreno, and it's not that far away from the election. I mean, the election is in October, and in July is when people qualify. So that means next month people qualifying. So if anybody's thinking about running for mayor, they got to be looking at these kind of numbers right now. And so I think it's a pretty important poll. This underscores what I think is the truth about this. The scheduled date for the primary is October 11th, and the runoff is November 15th. I still think there's not going to be a runoff. That there's 2 major candidates, and one of these people are going to win, and there won't be a runoff. And if there is a runoff, somebody really major needs to kind of get in the campaign in a hurry. In the sheriff's race, Michelle Woodfork has a 33% lead, and then Susan Hudson has 12%. And the poll was taken. The prison escape had already happened before the poll was taken, and so that could have been a factor. But she's at 12%, and she has an unfavorable rate of 65%, and so it doesn't look good for her. Looks very good for Michelle Woodfork, and I think that's another example of something that's going to be decided in the primary.
Okay, as you noted, though, qualifying is in July for,
Right.
yeah. So then the campaigning generally really gets started generally after Labor Day. So we'll see how the candidates present themselves.
Yeah. Well, the campaign, the campaign's been started for 2 years now. Okay. I mean, the campaign is like the backroom deals and the people looking at these kind of polls and that sort of thing. The public kind of campaigning, people start doing commercials, that kind of thing. That's what starts after Labor Day. But usually when you get to that point, a lot of the key things have been done that are going to influence the outcome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if this pattern holds, I mean, it's, it's good news for Moreno.
It certainly seems to be.
Yeah.
Okay, all righty, thanks a lot. All righty, Ben, let's go on over to you. The Orleans Parish Jail, I mean, since the breakout, we've heard about all sorts of plumbing problems over there. And anyway, there was a hearing this week for council, or what was it? It was for a council committee, right?
Right. Or it was a special council meeting, technically.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
At any rate, they met. And the council wants to know why, and the sheriff wants more money, and council says, well, we've given you money, how are you spending it?
Yeah, it feels like an argument that has been now going on for a long time, just in different manifestations. The latest thing, on top of this extreme crisis with this jailbreak, then we hear over Memorial Day weekend that there's flooding inside the jail, and it's a really chaotic situation in there. So another round of sheriff meets the council happens this week. And we learn that she's got a contractor in there to fix the plumbing, and he's found that the pipes weren't even properly fitted when the jail was constructed just 10 years ago. So there was some kind of increase in pressure, he wouldn't say what it was, and all the water came bursting out of these loosely fitting pipes. Plus there's corrosion in the pipes. They said that there were 16 active leaks. That's all to say, sheriff is coming hat in hand saying this is an immediate emergency fix of $300,000, and then another $900,000, or maybe $900,000 total over the long term for the plumbing. There has been a lot of debate over how much the sheriff actually has at her disposal. She's saying that all of my resources are taken up trying to keep this place together and trying to keep security tight. And council is saying, and she's saying that she's come to them many times, asking for fixes for all of the infrastructure problems in there. Each time she's met with, well, show us the details, and she doesn't often provide a lot of the specific situations until afterwards, like at the council meeting today. So there was an argument over what she has disclosed to them when, and what they're actually able to do, and what she can handle herself, and what the council should be providing, and it kind of just came out of, everyone came away unhappy.
So the council, I know I've seen, bits and pieces of this meeting, and the question comes out, well, you do have some reserve funds, don't you? Can't you use these funds for these emergency fixes? So
Yeah.
what does the sheriff say
Well,
to that?
there's even been like a disagreement over how much emergency or how much reserve funds that she actually has. The administration before the jailbreak was talking about giving her less money next year because they thought that she had a $14 million reserve based on audits, but it turns out she's got about $8 million. But even that amount is in dispute. She's saying that all of that is tied up in other things, other priorities. And the council is saying, well, why don't you use that for your plumbing leaks? So
where does it stand? Is she going to get more money or not? Or what's happening?
I think she's going to be on her own, at least for the plumbing, for the time being. I don't think coming out of that council meeting that anything was resolved. What we'll be telling is in the next round of budget hearings, which is around the time that there'll be a new sheriff, or possibly a new sheriff, whether she's there or not. Her campaign is suspended, but what we'll be telling is if the council adds more money then.
I know something that the council, seems to want to see happen is for the sheriff's office's accounting to move into the brass, what's called a brass system, where there would be more transparency if that data was in that system for the council.
That's what the council says. That's what the administration says. They've been pushing the sheriff's office to do this for some time. Basically, it would just join the sheriff's financial and accounting systems with the cities, and supposedly that would provide more transparency into how she's spending the money. She's resisted that up until lately. It looks like she might be more willing to do that now. I don't know. They were meeting on it this week, and we'll see what the outcome is.
Of course, another issue, too, in terms of the infrastructure, which is just, what, a 10-year-old jail, the locks on the doors.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, clearly, the locks have been dysfunctional. There's lots of reports dating back years of inmates being able to damage them and get out of their cells through that damage. So that's another thing that she said that needs to be fixed. But again, I think the council's looking for, give us an inventory of issues that need funding and put some details behind those requests.
Meanwhile, the jail remains under a consent decree.
Yeah.
Federal consent decree.
Yeah, stemming from a class action lawsuit in 2014 over the management of the jail. And what the federal monitors over that consent decree are showing is that there hasn't really been much improvement. Even just under the last few years, under Sheriff Hudson's tenure, there's been sharp increases in inmate-on-inmate attacks on staff members. It's just really been sort of a chaotic scene the entire time.
And of course, the escape of 10 inmates doesn't help.
Nope.
2 of whom remain at large.
2 of whom remain at large, yeah.
One of whom has been posting on social media.
That's right. So we'll see where all that goes.
All right. Okay, Ben. Thanks a lot. Tony, let's go back on over to you, because we had a tough start to the new year here in the city of New Orleans with a terrorist attack, first day of the year on Bourbon Street. But then the following month, we had Super Bowl. So how did we look?
Yeah, it really has to be said that with such a horrendous attack on Bourbon Street, 5 weeks before the Super Bowl was due to be held in the city, that it really was pulled off incredibly well. It had universal praise. I think there was obviously quite a lot of goodwill for the city after that, but there was still a lot to do. We reported that with just a few weeks left, they were still only just over halfway through this long list of improvements. Sorry, not improvements, really. They were essential road fixings and other cosmetic improvements to make the city look presentable. So this past week, now the governor and G&O Inc., the regional economic development guys, and LED and various others put out a study that they'd commissioned from LSU that said the economic impact of the Super Bowl here was a record. Overall $1.25 billion and $85 million in state and local taxes, a bunch of other numbers. But I have to say that the economic impact studies have to be taken with a grain of salt in terms of their precision. The last 2 Super Bowls in Las Vegas and previously in Phoenix were also records. And many of them have been in the past. But the real question here is, what's the lasting impact of the Super Bowl on the state and the city? A couple of the big highlights that they mentioned were the fact that they used the opportunity of this Super Bowl to have a big promotion for Louisiana businesses running alongside it. So they had 4,000 visitors come to this Louisiana Now pavilion that they set up down at the Whale Lot to host all these business leaders and dignitaries that were visiting, including like representatives of Hyundai, which had just previously announced a big investment in the state, and potential future investors. That's what they're really trying to impress and show them that we're open for business, as the governor has said. So the other thing is that it's Super Bowls are a big opportunity to kind of showcase your city. 6,000 media were here, and Walt Leger has talked about the impact that kind of exposure has had. I think they quantify it at about $6 million of publicity, free publicity. So,
did we get any extra points for Taylor Swift being there?
She, of course, had an event, a huge event of her own a few months
fall,
previous,
yeah.
which kind of was, partly leading to the improvements that were made in the city.
The president was at the Super Bowl too, right? Didn't he come down from the Super
Yeah.
Bowl as well? Yeah. So
First time
you
ever
were talking about
sitting president.
the sitting president, the exposure that the city got. A very very positive exposure. Of course, once again coming from just weeks before. Exposure we got following a terrorist attack, and also let us not forget about our snowfall. That was a busy few months for us. So basically, the feeling is positive. An economic impact for us. Let's talk about those infrastructure changes. I mean, there was so much work that was done, really condensed, really in a short amount of time. And Michael Hecht of GNO Inc. sort of led that effort to improve infrastructure. What's the feeling, months later now about the infrastructure improvements?
Well, I think there's just, you have to note that there's quite a bit of politics around that, right? The governor stepped in to say, we need to do this. I want to appoint Michael Hecht to oversee this effort. And then he got the mayor on board, and they did a joint press conference in the summer of last year to, the summer of infrastructure, summer of Super Bowl. I mean, they gave it a lot of different names. But what they ended up doing was, it was essentially an oversight project that had to be done still by all the folks that would need to do it anyway: Sewage and Water Board, DPW, Department of Public Works in the City Hall, and so on. So the question, I think, for Orleans Parish residents going forward is, will they take the lessons learned in that mad dash to do those improvements? About 500 projects, $70 million. We don't really know whether they got all of those done. We haven't seen any transparency on that, to be frank. But we can see when we look on our streets that some stuff was done. Some improvements certainly made in and around the kind of main tourist areas and the Superdome itself. But what happens going forward? Are they going to take that process that they put in place to do that and institutionalize it so that we can expect improvements in the way infrastructure is done going forward, and therefore less disruption, less torn up roads, less roads, and chronically. I mean, there were some repairs they did that had been there since time immemorial. Folks said, it was way before the previous Super Bowl in 2013 that big leak over on the HOV line lane had been there. So I think that's a big question for folks. And then the other question is, in terms of this economic impact study that we've just seen, is what was the real trickle down effect here? Because the Super Bowl is a $2.5 billion event, most of which goes to the NFL. And the cities, if you think about $1.25 billion here of an economic impact that was, let's say 400 million is what they said in the study, was what was in wages here. Are those additional permanent wages? Was there additional permanent job creation from this? I don't think anybody could argue that. I think it's, this supports the ongoing industry here. So I think people want to, the industry is actually, the hospitality industry as we go into the summer is suffering a bit.
Right.
It's a tough year. It's going to be a tough year, they expect. So it's, what are the lasting things that the industry gets out of an event like that is the kind of longer term question.
Right, but we did look good. The Superdome looked good too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All righty, Tony, thanks a lot. Okay, E, let's talk about the mayor of the city of New Orleans. She's now in France.
Yeah, she's in Nice this weekend. She's going to a summit, a United Nations summit on rising oceans issues. Now, last weekend, she was in Ottawa, Canada, came back and is on the way, and supposedly she has some staff that went along with her. According to a report in the newspaper, the Times-Picayune, New Orleans Advocate, that the good reporting by him, but they looked up a website, and she was going to be on a panel on Voices from Rising Oceans, and she was going to be on the panel with the Prime Minister of Tuvalu from Oceania and the chief of the Guana people in Panama. So those two people, and before it's over, she might sign them up to be sister cities in New Orleans. But anyway, she's traveled a lot, and just a couple of thoughts. maybe, as a journalist, are mayors ever required to give a report back in City Hall about
There's
what
no
they
requirement
learned?
for that. And I think that's part of what's been so challenging for her. No one's going to dispute that a mayor sometimes has to travel for the city. But she often struggles to give a concrete reason for why she's doing it and how it's benefiting the city. And I don't think that people would necessarily begrudge even once in a while if she goes to a conference. But this is happening now 2 weekends in a row. She's out of the country. We have the jailbreak crisis going on. This is the end of the legislative session, and the mayor's just not here. In the past, when she's been gone, there's been flooding in the city. There's been other issues, and she's just not around. So I think this becomes irksome for people when they're looking for the mayor for leadership on issues, and she's gone.
And of course, the council had passed a ban on unnecessary travel, but that's been stayed by a court.
Yes, the court found that the council overstepped its authority on that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
If there is anything that she learned, though, that we should know about, she needs to be aware that her term's going to be ending soon. Her term ends January 12th. And so between now and then, when she gets back, she needs to sit down and tell us what we need to know that was told to her in Nice.
Yes, regarding it, because that's an important issue, is the climate and rising waters. Okay, Ian, other stories.
Well, this is the weekend of the D-Day anniversary. And in the history of D-Day, one person that's very important in telling that history has been Stephen Ambrose from the UNO. I counted up today. He had 8 books that seem to be related to D-Day. One that's really, really important is Band of Brothers, which was also made into a documentary. Also a paperback called simply D-Day. And then another book about the invasion, starting at Normandy and going for the Bulge. But he's really become the important journalist from writing about it. And so this would be a good time to look at those books and learn more about it. It's an important event.
And then, of course, go to the World War II Museum, which he and Nick Mueller started.
Which he was responsible for.
Celebrates her 25th anniversary.
Go to the museum, too.
Yeah, absolutely. It started out as D-Day, remembering D-Day on June 6th. Okay, thanks. Over to you, Ben.
So the Sewerage and Water Board is going to be under new leadership come July 28th. It'll be very interesting to see how the utility turns after that. They're under a lot of new direction right now with lots of new legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tony?
In the news a lot, of course, is Elon Musk and President Trump's fallout, at the center of which is the reduction of subsidies for electric vehicles, of course, which Tesla counts on. We have a story on Monday. My colleague Blake Patterson has a look at the $40 billion of investments in the state of Louisiana that are at risk because the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I believe it's called, will gut the IRA subsidies for clean energy.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
From Masterpiece to Nova, Antiques Roadshow to Agatha Christie,
And of course, stepping out and inform sources.
we are pleased to support public television
It's been our passion.
for a lifetime.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.